morning, everyone. I'm Aaron Hodden. I'm the second year here. Before I introduce Professor Neely, I have a programming note. So this panel ends at 12:15 and lunch starts promptly at 12:30. So parents told me to pass that along. If you could just head right across back to the Spanish clerk into the waiting room. Okay, today's panel, diversity in Silicon Valley. I want to introduce our moderators. We can get right into it. Today, our moderator is Professor Snell Neely, who's an associate professor in the Organizational Behavior Unit here at Harvard Business School. And her research focuses on the challenges of being global collaborators across national linguistic boundaries. Her research has been featured in CNN, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, NPR, and The Economist. Professor Neely received her PhD from Stanford, where she won the Lieberman Award for teaching excellence in research. She's fluent in 4 languages, and her energy and enthusiasm are contagious. I know because I'm in her class this semester, and I can think of no better person to honor this panel. So please help me welcome Professor Snell Neely.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate all the work that you've done here. Before we begin, I have to say that this is my 8th year at the Harvard Business School, and I've never seen a bigger turnout at a conference. Never seen a bigger turnout. And the work that the students have done, the way that they've mobilized this year has been stunning. And the work that the alums have done to mobilize has been stunning. And the work that Professor Stephen Rogers, right there, that one, has been stunning. So this is a terrific conference, and I hope a terrific panel to talk about what's happening in Silicon Valley. So an important question is, we're talking about diversity issues in Silicon Valley in this panel, and why are we doing that? And we're going to engage that question. And I'm going to invite members of the audience to think and talk about this. This is going to be a discussion, a real discussion. So we're not going to format this as the panelists speak and then Q&A. I want everyone in here to bring the collective wisdom to think about these issues, particularly since it's a distinctive place. Why do we care about this? We're sitting in Boston, Massachusetts, where it snows a lot. Why do we care about this? So our panelists are these incredible leaders who are in Silicon Valley today and who have firsthand experience on the issue of diversity in Silicon Valley, but more importantly, on the missed opportunity because of this lack of diversity and leadership that's representative of people who are in this very room. So what I've asked them to do to begin is to introduce themselves. You read their incredible bios. They've all won awards. They're all alums. They're all absolutely incredible and doing impactful work in their respective companies. But I asked them to introduce themselves as a way to open, to answer the question, what do you want to share about yourself, but also what is exciting to you about your work in Silicon Valley? And Aaron is going to get us started.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I am super excited to be here. Graduated from HBS in 2010, so my 5-year reunion is in a couple months, and definitely feel nostalgic to be back among some of my closest friends from business school. So it's good to be here. I am incredibly passionate about Silicon Valley. I think everyone in this room should move to Silicon Valley, if not tomorrow, soon. So I do have an agenda for being on this panel.
We know.
So I graduated in 2010, and then I did consulting for just under a year. And 6 months in, I knew that it wasn't kind of the career path that I wanted to be pursuing. And so I have a background in tech. My undergrad degree is in computer science and computer engineering. And what was happening in Silicon Valley at the time, and this is 2010, was just incredible. So LinkedIn had just gone public. I think Zynga had filed their S1 to go public. Twitter and Facebook were on the verge of becoming public, and definitely marching in that direction. And so I saw a couple things that were happening in Silicon Valley that literally were not happening anywhere else in the world. And that was like incredibly intriguing to me. And so I made the decision to move to Silicon Valley. I accepted an offer from Twitter, doing product work there. And after Twitter, I worked at a small startup, and then joined Yahoo about a year and a half ago to work under one of what I believe is the best CEOs in the Valley. And so I'm incredibly excited about Silicon Valley for two reasons. The first is in terms of innovation. So what is happening in Silicon Valley in terms of the way that disruption is happening? Like, we all have taken a lot of us have taken Clay Christensen's course on the Innovator's Dilemma, and like the extent to which disruption is happening all over the world. And there's one thing that I see in common, right, across all industries, whether that be transportation, media, retail, and e-commerce, TV, education. A lot of the disruption that we're experiencing right now really started from companies in Silicon Valley, startups, hypergrowth companies, right? So with transportation, you can think about Uber and Lyft. With e-commerce, you can think about Amazon and a variety of retail e-commerce plays. And so that is incredibly exciting to me. And I think that there's something there that is interesting, and I just want to be a part of it. And then the second is wealth creation. So I'll say two things, and then I'll kind of leave it there. When Twitter IPO'd, 1,200 people became millionaires. 1,200 people who weren't millionaires became millionaires. And when Facebook IPO'd, another 1,000 people became millionaires. And Uber just raised another round. They now have a $40 billion valuation. That company is full of people who, once they have an exit, will become millionaires. And that is just not happening anywhere else in the world. So I think Silicon Valley is exciting for those two reasons.
Thank you, Aaron. So before, Damien, you introduce yourself. So Damien, I first met him in his very first Chattanooga case discussion at HBS. You know how we do these training cases? He was in my Chattanooga case, so I met him day one. And the only thing I want to say before he introduces himself is he used to work at Goldman Sachs. And I've seen him at Goldman Sachs, and he was suited up. He had on a suit, maybe a 4 or 5 piece suit. He cut his toenails. He shows up after a few months at Google, and can you stand up? Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Jeans and shoes. That's Silicon Valley. Okay, Damien, introduce yourself.
Thank you for at least putting some logic behind this.
Yes, I had to do that for you.
I don't want people to think I don't know how to act. I do. Hi, everybody. Hi, AASU. Yeah. What Erin didn't mention, it may be in her bio, and there are a couple other folks who are in the room, is that we share the great honor of being former co-presidents of AASU, and just, hats off to... Not together. But what you all have done here today and yesterday and will continue to do is excellent. So just hats off to you all. Happy to be back. Damian Hooper Campbell, let's see, HBS class of 2009. I'll try to speed through this. So I had a background in nonprofit and kind of Wall Street. And then when I graduated, or as I was graduating, I had this offer to go back to Wall Street. And then the admissions board tapped me and said, hey, you've been in Sankofa, you've done some stuff, you seem to be really passionate about the minority community. How about you say no to Wall Street and come join the admissions board and run our 2+2 program in strategy and marketing? And I kind of laughed. I was like, how am I going to go from HBS to being on the admissions board? And I prayed about it, thought about it, and this kind of gets to a point about why I'm excited about the Valley, but it was really, in my opinion, one of the best ways to have impact. So I graduated, I joined the admissions board, did that for 2 years, then went to Goldman to do executive coaching, leadership development. So all the great stuff that we do in the classrooms, the real experts do. I was there coaching the senior leaders at Goldman for about 3 years. And then I joined Google. about 10 months ago, actually. So moved from Brooklyn out to the West Coast. At Google, so you asked what we do in the context of diversity. So I'm on the diversity team at Google, and my role is to make the Valley, at least a significant portion of it, look just like this classroom, right? That's what it is. That's what it is. And so it's really trying to change the face of technology, which brings me to the second part of your question about what I'm excited about. So everything that Aaron said, and I'm sure we probably all are excited about the same things. One is ownership. Before HBS, I worked in Harlem doing grant writing and stuff for nonprofits. And I saw all these brownstones being owned by people who didn't look like us. And as I dug a little bit deeper, I learned that there were opportunities where some of these brownstones were being given away for $1, right? There were tons of opportunities that we didn't capitalize on. The Valley, technology, we are witnessing another opportunity to own. And the last thing I want to see is Google, Facebook, all the products that we have, all the apps that we have, and there not be but a handful of people who look like us who are actually owning them. So that's number one, is ownership, is why I think we have to get in this game. The second piece is impact. These companies are very young. There's tons of money on their balance sheets. Can you imagine what it would be like to take all of the civic-minded aspirations that we have to change the world to help our communities and put technology behind it? Yeah, you can do that on Wall Street, but technology is another place to actually have impact. And I've seen things happen since I've been there. Literally in a month, somebody raised $20 million in-house to do things that are going to benefit the Black and Hispanic community. So those are the two things that I would say I'm most excited about, and I'll pass it on.
Great, thank you, Damien. Nadia.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Nadia Rawlinson, class of 2008. So also happy to be here. Why tech and why diversity for me? So just a quick story. I went to Stanford for undergrad, and I was there during the time of the first bubble I experienced, which is around 2000, 2001. And I saw all of my classmates, Brown and otherwise, who were going out to Sand Hill Road raising money. There were they were 19 and 20 years old. One of them was one of my RAs in my dorm who decided to stop out of school for a while to go and start this business. And I saw it passing me by. And that was something for me as a history major. I wasn't a CS major, but I was a history major and said, oh, well, this isn't really for me. How can I really be involved in tech? But this is where the future is happening. And I'm literally watching it pass me by with friends and classmates and dorm mates who were participating in the new economy. So if there was ever an opportunity to be involved again, I vowed to myself I would never, ever miss it. So hence, here comes HBS. 2008, don't really have great timing coming out of school around, downturns. But 2008 ended up going to American Express. I actually did my summer internship at Google. And it was my first time experiencing a company that actually walked the walk around what talent means, that they really wanted the best and the brightest, and talent is fungible. So whoever you were, if you passed the talent bar, they just wanted to put the best people against their most complex problems. And the way that I could be at that intersection was leading in the human capital arena. So hence why I'm in HR. So that's where I was able to enter the tech arena where I can have influence and impact. Which gets me to my second point of why I'm excited about tech, is that you can have an impact. Best idea wins. There's no boundaries. There's no hierarchy for the most part. And if you really are there to really iterate, to really build, to really create some execution-oriented ideas, that's what's valued. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, for the most part, right? And that's something that attracted me, particularly coming from a company like American Express, where things were so rigid and hierarchical. Very, very good learning ground. And I've used that experience in other things that I've done within tech. So from there, from American Express, I went to a company called Rent the Runway. The co-founders were a year behind me. I think they were in your class, Jen and Jenny. And they were looking for a human capital leader, and they tapped their Harvard network. And I think I'm probably one of 5 people who went in HR out of HBS. So they said, do you know anyone? I said, yeah, I knew, me, here. And so from that email exchange to offer took 8 days, which was just indicative of the speed through which technology happens and being a part of the startup community and the innovation and idea generation. So from there it was, hey, how can I really make an impact in the things that I care about? Leading the human capital space in technology, being able, to your point, make each organization be reflective of a room like this. And it's important to start from the very beginning. It's important to start from the idea generation phase with the founders themselves, whether it's Square, whether it's Groupon, whether it's Rent the Runway, whether it's Medium that just started by one of the co-founders of Twitter. I mean, all of that is important to start thinking about these ideas now and getting all of us the best talent in the room now, because that's how organizations evolve over time. And if we don't start now, we'll be facing an uphill battle from there. So
if you heard that from Nadia, you'll be recruited very, very fast. That was really good, Nadia. You'll have some. So Marcelino, who is at Intel, and Intel has recently made some massive announcements. In your introduction, can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I went through an executive leadership program at Harvard several years ago. And actually what precipitated that was me trying to start a startup organization inside a big company like Intel. So I took one of those programs to really drive that. But my background is, I'm one of those people that once I got out of school, I just wanted to make sure that all my ships were sailing in the right direction. And I took a variety of different roles. The direction that I wanted to go in was interactive technology and interactive entertainment. So I did a startup, actually did a couple startups along the way in Silicon Valley. I worked at the FCC for Bill Kennard and Michael Powell in the area of law and strategic media analysis to really understand what some of the big conglomerates were doing around M&A activity, developing more broadband, what the demand and supply for bandwidth would look like. And then I went back to my native Los Angeles and worked in the entertainment industry for TV Guide. I got recruited out of TV Guide, where I was doing some corporate development and then worked in a business unit as the head of business development for one of the publishing segments that we had. But I got recruited into Intel because at the time, Intel was trying to get more into the media space or the hardware space around the connected home. But the challenge was they really didn't have that perspective of understanding the business models of Hollywood, advertising subscription-based models, how content was actually produced, and how those folks actually thought about Silicon Valley. So I actually jumped at the chance because, and this is one of the things that excites me about being in the Valley, being on the entertainment side, being at a studio or at an entertainment company, I was always challenged when it came to the negotiation table about understanding the underlying hardware and software implications. I didn't really know about Java, yet I'm sitting there trying to do a deal related to Java, related applications. I didn't really understand hardware or software. These were all kind of topics or issues that I didn't really grasp because I have a non-technical background. So when Intel came calling, I jumped at the chance to really polish my technology skills, my business acumen in that area. As a result, 9 years later, after sitting in meetings at Intel, I probably have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering just by sitting in the room.
Yeah.
So mission accomplished. I have both skill sets now, and that's served me very well. To kind of touch upon what folks have said here, I think if you're a self-starter and you feel that you're smart or as good as the next person, you can actually accomplish a lot. Once you get over that barrier of, or perceived barrier of thinking in the spirit of competition of ideas, are my ideas as good as the person across the table from me? Do I know what it takes to put together a business plan and go out and sell my ideas, sell myself? Because really, as you all know, you're trying to raise money, you're selling yourself because they invest in people. Once you get past that, I think Silicon Valley can be a place of opportunity. It's not perfect by any means, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, over the course of this discussion. But I think if you have the will, the common sense, practical skill sets, you can really accomplish a lot. And like I said, I didn't think that I'd end up in a Silicon Valley company, but I'm there and I'm thriving. So, I mean, that's a testament to if I can do it, I'm sure folks in this room can do it.
And Intel's recent announcement. Can
Right,
you
exactly.
touch on
So-
that really quickly?
So, yeah, really quickly. So, I was talking to my wife about this. I was really surprised when our CEO announced at CES a $300 million initiative around diversity and technology. But really, it starts from a good place, which is diversity is good business. Bottom line. And as you know, when you have the board and then the CEO driving an initiative, telling corporate vice presidents, senior vice presidents, executive vice presidents that their pay is tied to full representation by 2020, people take notice. Now, this initiative isn't even 90 days old.
Right.
We're scrambling to put all the infrastructure in place to be able to support this, but people are now sitting up in their chairs and they're taking notice of how we can do better in these areas. We'll talk about that in a moment, I'm sure.
Okay, terrific. So the four of you made it sound so good and nice and lovely. Wealth creation, you can be an owner, innovation, entrepreneurship. But the reality is a few reports have come out recently, and you're in a teeny minority in Silicon Valley. Why is that, number one, from your perspective? And you're selling Silicon Valley. Why should we all run over there to be isolated? And how do we make sure we succeed? You can take this in parts. So what's going on in Silicon Valley?
So can I take the why is that?
Yes,
piece?
yes,
'Cause
Damien.
all
Why?
right. So this is a big old problem, okay? This goes back, I mean, Professor Rogers is here, and I take my hat off to you, sir. I heard you a couple of years ago at the AASU conference, and he just drops knowledge on everything from slavery, right? So it actually goes back that far, right? When you talk about some of the systemic inequities that exist in our community. But let's just fast forward and let's just really make it more granular. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Mathematics and sciences in particular. If you look at our elementary school children, their exposure to it, the quality of education they're getting, the relevance in which it's taught, there's a disconnect that's happening there. If that doesn't happen there, then guess what? By the time you get to college, you're not choosing things that are computer science. And by the way, there are non-technical roles in tech, but I'm focusing specifically on kind of the more technical roles, right? So by the time you get to college, it ain't happening. And if it is happening, well, first of all, you got to get to a school that has a quality of education that's going to make you ready to go to Intel or to Groupon or to Yahoo or to Google. And then if you get to school, you got to stick it out. And I know I'm looking at my boy TK right here and Aaron, who were both engineers at Michigan, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard these stories at a top school, like people drop out, right? So there's a pipeline issue, number one, that comes from a lot of other things. Then you got to talk about, well, what happens to the people who actually make it past and through the pipeline? When they actually get to a Google and they're looking around, who are they interviewing with? Does anybody look like them? Yeah?
No.
Right.
Oh, I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no. Does anybody look like them? Right? And to make it very clear, we have 2%. 2%, how many people at Google, anybody know? 50,000 plus. 2% of our company are black. 3% of our company are Hispanic, okay? So then you get there and it's like, ugh. And then if you haven't been prepared, you're not getting through the interview, and then there's this thing called unconscious bias, right? Where if I come from Carnegie Mellon or MIT or Stanford and I don't look like people who are in this room and I'm testing you in a way that you get tested at MIT, Stanford, et cetera, when you come from my alma mater, Morehouse, and you haven't been prepared that way, it's not that you're not smart, that's a totally different way of thinking. And then the final thing I'll say, right, because it's not just about bringing us into the valley, it's also about keeping us there. How in the hell are you going to keep the few black folks who you have? And I'm going to give one more shout out. Where's Fabian? Okay, Fabian Elliott right here is a Googler. He is the global co-head of Google's Black Googler Network, right, which is 600 strong. It's kind of like the AASU at Google, okay? You got to keep people like Fabian and Aaron and all of us there. And if it's not an inclusive environment, we heard Dean Noria talk about this morning, if you get to HBS and you feel polarized, or you feel ostracized, then guess what? You ain't gonna stay. So it's about the pipeline, it's about actually changing some of the way that we recruit, looking in different places besides just the Ivy Leagues, and then also doing our part to make sure that people are having an experience when they're there so that they won't bounce.
Anyone else want to comment
I
on
was
this?
just to complement that answer. We had a situation a couple of weeks ago. I'll just tell a quick story where there's someone that I used to work with who has left Groupon to go be a part of a startup in the Valley, and we were having dinner. And he was talking about his job right now, because the company has about less than 10 people, is fundraising. And I said, well, how many minority investors do you have? And he was like, well, none, because I don't know any. And that is one of the other fundamental problems, is pattern recognition in networks, right? So if I'm going to go out and raise money for a startup where everyone talks about, oh, it's free money, but who has this money? You need to be able to have the diverse networks available in order to bring the capital to fund these businesses that then make choices for the management team, the product, the strategy, the direction. And that doesn't necessarily exist. So that's where some of the issue comes from. And it's up to those of us, those few of us, the 2 to 3% that are there, to force those conversations. So it was in that moment when I was saying, well, who do you need to have access to? What's the buy-in? Like, so it's a $25,000 to $50,000 buy-in that you have to be able to freely, not care about this money because the venture may go under. You just don't know. It's a very risky investment, but you're betting on the people. But if people don't know those people or have access to those people, it's very difficult to, one, understand what investment vehicles from a startup perspective are available, and two, where to go to find the funding that is the most diverse. So part of this is not just the pipeline, it's also the people who control the capital who are making the decisions for some of these companies that are being founded in the Valley.
Just to piggyback on that, another area which is hidden but is a big problem is the portrayal of women and people of color in gaming, which if you don't have diverse...
Can you explain that? When you say gaming, what do you mean?
It's actually one of the reasons why our CEO became passionate about the diversity issue, because Intel supplies, we call it silicon chips, to all sorts of gaming PC companies, Alienware and the like, and back-end server technology. As a result, we advertise on a variety of gaming-related websites. Well, we got embroiled in an issue because we placed an ad on a site that had a very hotly contested issue around the portrayal of women in gaming. I'm not talking Xbox or PS4. I'm talking high-end gamers using servers that literally have to be in air-conditioned rooms because they're running so fast. There had been an issue related to the portrayal of women in some of these really hardcore games. Once that was brought to the attention of the CEO, who has daughters, it became a personal issue.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? It became a personal issue for a lot of executives who have daughters and wives and sisters.
Yeah.
So sometimes and that issue probably would not have been risen to the level of consciousness for us had it not been for the technology aspect and realizing there's a big gap here and why is this happening in some of these games. And so, it speaks to if you don't have folks in key positions working in this space, things like this will happen, and it could just pass us by without really taking a closer look at it.
Right. So you've given us a lot to think about, from why it's so exciting, that there are issues, that the numbers are small. And I want to invite you to think of questions that you may have. So I'll give you a moment to think of questions. And while you do that, let me tell you that, so I did my PhD at Stanford. And when I got accepted to the PhD program, I flew from Boston, where I'm from, to California, and they were extra nice to me. The dean and another professor took me out to dinner. I thought that was normal, actually, that you always take your admits to dinner with the dean, and I had no idea. And then the dean, after maybe 2 or 3 glasses of wine, says, "Do you know you are first black woman ever to be admitted to the PhD program in our institution, in the history of the institution. I was like, my heart stopped, literally. And then I started wondering, should I go to this institute? Should I go to Stanford? I mean, like, is that good? And the next day, there was another admissions event where they had a number of panels, including the president of the Black Graduate Student Association, this very handsome, tall brother named Lawrence. What? So he presents, and at the end of it, I went straight to him because he was the only black person in the room, and I said, listen, I'm considering to come here, but I'm worried about being isolated in Silicon Valley here in Palo Alto. You know, I'm from Boston. We don't have to drive 5 miles to get milk, you know. And he says, yeah, it's kind of tough, but, you know, we really have a strong community here. To make a long story short, I did go to Stanford, and I did marry that man, so. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can you press the button right in front of you? These are mics. Be really helpful.
Okay. So my name is Ray Gerald. As you can see from all this gray, I'm an elderly statesman here. And to give you some perspective, Nayla Fitzhugh was my marketing professor at Howard University.
Wow.
And to the question of, I think you asked, of why endure the isolation in these various circumstances in which Silicon Valley will place you initially, what I'll suggest to you between the years of 1967, which was the first year that the first black woman was admitted to Harvard Business School, and 1969, which was my year, where we had the largest black class ever to be admitted to the Harvard Business School. At that time, there were 100 students. And so, and that was 1/7 of the total class for that year. Nonetheless, it was not a circumstance in which you didn't feel isolated at various times through your sections and as you sort of went around the campus. But look at it today, and there are 300 people here today at this conference, and I suggest to you that the same isolation you don't feel today. So it's necessary to do a little bit of pioneering, not for the sake of pioneering, but simply because as you watch things sort of evolve, and the world of Silicon Valley, and what I would add as well that you need to consider life sciences as an area of interest. As that evolves, it simply becomes a deal where these are the areas where the country, the world is going to stand going forward, and you need to be represented in those new circumstances. And you need to be represented in those circumstances at all levels, including the entrepreneurial effort.
Yeah.
Today, I lead a company that is involved in the life sciences area. We're developing a biochip that is to be used to assess chemical compounds that are designed to be, that is slated to be new medicines. And the challenge of our business proposition is that instead of killing animals, you can actually test stuff on this chip. It's an exciting area. And not enough of us are in the life sciences. I encourage all of you to give it some consideration and come out to San Francisco, even stay here in Boston or New York or North Carolina, and get involved in those areas. It's just exciting.
Thank you for
I
that.
have a friend over there, is Ken Powell. We're in the same era, so you'll see that gray on him too.
Yes. Terrific. Thank you for that. Let's take a question here. Yes. Press your, yes, beautiful.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Johnson. I am a mid-career student at the Kennedy School, and I have worked in the tech sector all of my career. I'm also a social entrepreneur. The company I work for currently in the tech sector is a big multinational, $100 billion plus company, 20 plus billion in profit. This company has chosen not to release its diversity data in the way that Google has. I'm wondering if by releasing the diversity data, how has that impacted Google's ability to recruit and retain people?
Great question. Great. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah,
Jamie?
I'll answer it really quickly because
Yeah.
I know we want to get some questions in. One, it's been positive and negative. Positive in that we've gotten some goodwill from being kind of one of the first to go out there in a certain way. I think Intel may have done that 10 years ago, but we did it in a very kind of PR splashy way so that people would see it, and it made a lot of other companies do the same. So forget the goodwill. We're just happy that people are acknowledging it's not just a Google problem. It's tough on the other end because you put yourself in the hot seat, right? And what the external market doesn't get is that diversity is a long-term game. It's not like building an app where you can do it in a couple of months or a couple of weeks. So in a few months, we've got to go back publicly and say, and here are our diversity numbers a couple of years or a year later, and they will not have changed significantly.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do now is, sorry, I'll stop there. Great, because everybody else is talking about it and people are saying, oh, wow, these companies are acknowledging it. They want us there, right? Helps us to tell that story. Tough, because then you are on the hot seat and sometimes the external expectations don't match the internal reality.
Okay, great. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Almabu. I'm really happy that you guys are here because I'm really passionate about this topic. I'm actually an enterprise account manager at Lithium Technologies. We're a social media software company based out in San Francisco. I'm in New York. I actually just came back from my sales kickoff in San Francisco where I sat in a room of 300 people and I'm the only black female. So there are often times, besides like the annoying questions about my hair changing from an afro to longer, like besides those annoying questions, it's very hard being, the only black female at my company. So some of the things that I wanted to gain your insight into, I see that you guys have a Black Googler network. I've actually been to some events. How do you start that conversation with your employer? Because I would love to start something like that. There's not that many of us, but I want to start putting that in my leaders' minds.
Nadia?
That's a very, very good question. And that was something at Groupon we had to struggle with ourselves. We're only 6 years old. We've been public only for 3 years. And the perception of leadership was we don't have time to think about this right now. We're too young. We're still trying to figure out our business model. We have a lot of volatility in the space. We're still trying to gain the credibility of the street. Diversity is a nice to have, not a requirement. Yeah. We started our ERGs, or employee resource groups, which is similar to what you guys have, in that it was a groundswell of support from an organic effort of employees. So there may be just you, but is there another person of color or some other group that's either protected class or marginalized in some way? We have some groups on our overseas office, expats, something like that, where you can get the energy going from the employees themselves. And when you have a quorum of people who are passionate about something, who are willing to dedicate their discretionary time to building something outside of their day-to-day work, that's compelling. And that's something that you can go to your CEO or your VPs or whoever with to say, look, this energy's already been happening, there's momentum there, all we have to do is amplify it. So there's not a lot of work for your CEO or for your VPs to do. It's literally just highlighting what's already there. That's been a method that's worked for us and has allowed it to be sustainable over time because it's not a top-down effort. It's something that's driven by all of us that are in the room who wants that to happen. So that's one approach you can think about taking.
Aaron, can you?
Absolutely, completely agree with that. I think the grassroots way of approaching this is by far the most impactful. And the absolute most impactful is connecting whatever your ERG is doing with the business priorities, right? Like revenue. So I'll give you an example. I worked at Twitter when I was the first Black woman hired at Twitter, and when I was there were maybe around 400, sub 500 employees. And so myself and a colleague of mine who's also Black, we started the Black Twitter group. Right, we called ourselves Blackbirds. Very original, very original. But it was a very easy business case because year after year, the Pew Institute for Research came out with all of this data that clearly said that African Americans are over-indexed across all social media platforms, specifically Twitter. In fact, across all demographic types, right? So Black people are over-indexed even more than like the hot age group, the millennials, 18 and 34-year-olds, right? So there are a larger number of Black people across all age groups that are active users on Twitter than there are even just 18 to 24-year-olds across the board. And so, so what was happening internally is like things would trend and no one internally at the company would understand why a certain hashtag was trending or why like, you know, because a lot of the features within Twitter were user created, right? The @ symbol, @ reply, dot before you @ reply, hashtags, et cetera, et cetera. So, so what we began to do is take these things that were happening across our user base, our most loyal, most engaged users who are incredibly active and retained over time, and connect those behavior patterns with the work that our ERG was doing, because we understood something that no one else, not the board, not the CEO, understood about our user base. And that is like the most powerful thing that you, as the only Black woman at your company or within your division, can do. I always know that I have a unique voice in the room, right? Like, literally, my team is 60 engineers. There are 3 women, and I'm the only Black person. And definitely the only Black woman, always. So I think just so I always have a unique insight, like something that no one else has ever thought about, right? And the thing that's interesting that was mentioned earlier is, you know, like people can, a lot of folks who've been in Silicon Valley for a really long time, men, white men, the majority non-underrepresented minority men understand is, they can relate to the experience of what the women in their lives are experiencing, right? Because maybe they're married, they have daughters, sisters, but the understanding what it's like to be Black is much harder for them, right? And so like shedding, whatever way you can shed insight into that experience, specifically as it relates to the user base, it's like, it's a home run.
That's
every
great.
time.
So we have 3.5 minutes left. And the first question I want to ask everyone here is, who's a little bit more curious about Silicon Valley after today's panel?
Yay.
That's pretty fantastic. And so in the last few minutes that we have, because I know, Aaron, we have to be on time. Okay. Yeah, he's my boss today. What does it take to be successful in that environment? And earlier we talked about, when people talk about Silicon Valley, is it a geography? Aaron believes, yes, it's absolutely a geography and not kind of the broad perspective of these globally distributed organizations. So there's that part of it. But we also know from Damien's new dress behavior that this is a different culture. It's a different, unique culture. Nadia knows this, and I've lived in it as well in Marcelino. Very quickly, can you go around? What does it take to be successful in that environment? Can you start for us, Marcelino? And we'll close out that way.
Sure, really quickly. How many non-engineers in the room? Okay, this is my advice. To succeed, Silicon Valley is a very data-driven place because you're working with a bunch of engineers who are data-driven people. So the sooner you can wrap your arms around data-driven decision-making and how to influence effectively using data, you'll succeed.
Yeah. Beautiful. Nadia?
The one word I would say is resilience. No matter where you come from, the culture is very different, whether you're the only or you are a non-engineer and you're going into a new environment where the speed of decision-making is faster than probably you've ever experienced. People say they get it, but you don't get it until you're there. And you need to really be adaptable to that type of environment, and that will continue to happen over and over again. Whether you are in a group where you are trying to learn something that you do not know, and you have to be resilient to keep trying. You have to continue to put the best ideas forward, even if they get shot down. If you want to lead a particular product group and you're chosen for one thing over another, it's all about the resilience. The things change quickly, and you need to be able to adapt and continue to show up every day and give 110%.
That's great. Damien?
I'll steal something from the head of HBS admissions, Dee Leopold. Tiffany boxes. very nicely wrapped. They look perfect. The Valley is not a Tiffany box. If you need structure, if you're not okay thriving in chaos, if you're not okay with just as you think you got it, it totally radically changing again, it might not be the right environment for you. But if you are, your ability to flip that and not look at it as chaos, but look at it as an opportunity to make history. Every single day, we're in uncharted territory. When you ask somebody, where's the blueprint for this? Who did it last time? The answer is generally nobody. We're 15 years old. We're 6 years old. We need you to create it. If that's something that is interesting to you, it can be scary, but if you're up for that challenge, go for it.
Aaron.
So my biggest piece of advice, so I think this is kind of, once you've made the decision that coming to Silicon Valley is the right thing to do, that's kind of the spin I'm taking on the question. My biggest and best piece of advice is to learn the technology, learn the language that is spoken, and just being able to communicate effectively, and that's regardless of function, whether you're in HR, diversity, finance, marketing, being able to speak the language of the company, right? The core competencies of that company is incredibly important. And there's so many free ways to do this, right? Codecademy, Khan Academy, Coursera, Udacity, Udemy. I mean, I literally could name all of these free online websites where you can download an app, go to a website, take a quick class, it's not scored. Just to be able to speak the same lexicon gives you so much more credibility in the room, regardless of your functional area. And I think that's key. And that's consistent with being data-driven, but I also think having an aptitude for the technology, right? That's incredibly important.
Well, the purpose of this session was to bring awareness on what's happening in Silicon Valley, to think about the fact that indeed there are diversity issues, but that doesn't mean that there's a room and opportunity for many of you, of us, to be represented as part of the exciting innovation, entrepreneurship, wealth creation that's taking place in Silicon Valley. So my hope is that this is really an appetizer for many of you, something to dig deep on, or for many others of you to begin to develop some competencies and some intelligence so that perhaps Silicon Valley is an interesting option for you. I thank our panelists so very much. They flew all the way from either California and Chicago. Really appreciate it.